March 1943. The English Channel transformed into a graveyard every night. German E-boats hunted British convoys with impunity, sinking an average of 14 vessels weekly. Conventional tactics failed repeatedly. Admiralty reports documented losses mounting past acceptable thresholds. Then came the night when Lieutenant Robert Ashworth, commanding MTB 231, already taking water from a torpedo strike, made a decision that defied every regulation in the Royal Navy handbook. What happened in the following 20 minutes would leave German naval intelligence unable to explain how 6 of their fastest attack craft vanished in circumstances their doctrine insisted were impossible. 21:47 hours, 12th of March, 1943. Dover Strait, 12 miles south of Ramsgate. The temperature hovered at 3 degrees Celsius. Salt spray turned to ice on Lieutenant Robert Ashworth's face as MTB 231 carved through black water under moonless sky. The metallic taste of fear mixed with diesel fumes, whilst the Packard engines roared at 1,400 revolutions, pushing the 70-foot motor torpedo boat through 4-foot swells. Behind them, a convoy of 18 merchantmen hugged the English coast, carrying medical supplies desperately needed in North Africa, where Montgomery's 8th Army faced Rommel's final desperate counterattacks. Ashworth, 24 years old, hailed from Portsmouth, son of a dockyard foreman who'd survived Jutland. He joined the Royal Navy in 1939 with romantic notions about naval warfare, expecting battleship duels and destroyer actions. Instead, he found himself commanding 70 feet of plywood and petrol, facing Germany's Schnellboot, the E-boats that hunted British coastal waters with terrifying efficiency. The wireless crackled. Coastal Force Charlie 7, this is Dover Control. Enemy surface craft detected bearing 270, distance 8 miles, closing rapidly. Estimate 6 contacts. Repeat, 6 contacts. 6 E-boats. Each one slightly larger than Ashworth's MTB, better armed, crewed by Kriegsmarine sailors who'd spent 3 years perfecting the deadly art of coastal interception. The German boats carried 2 20mm cannon and 4 torpedoes apiece. They operated with mechanical precision, hunting in coordinated packs that surrounded British convoys like wolves circling sheep. Ashworth's second-in-command, Sub-Lieutenant James Crawford from Glasgow, appeared at his elbow. 22 years old, engineering graduate from University of Strathclyde, Crawford had volunteered after watching Luftwaffe bombers destroy half his neighbourhood during the Clyde Bank Blitz. Orders, sir? Standard doctrine was explicit. 3 MTBs should screen the convoy whilst remaining craft positioned for torpedo attack. The problem? Tonight, only 2 MTBs remained operational. MTB 229 had limped back to Dover 3 hours earlier with engine failure. MTB 234 was somewhere to the north, having pursued a contact that proved to be a fishing trawler. That left Ashworth's MTB 231 and Lieutenant Peter Hammond's MTB 227, 2 70-foot boats against 6 German attack craft, defending 18 merchantmen, carrying supplies that could determine whether wounded soldiers lived or died in North African field hospitals. "We follow doctrine," Ashworth said, tasting the inadequacy of those words. "Screen the convoy. Force them to engage us instead of the merchantmen." What he didn't say, doctrine assumed numerical parity. Doctrine assumed support. Doctrine was written by men who never stood on a pitching deck watching 6 enemy craft, closing at 35 knots whilst you commanded 2 boats protecting 18 targets. The radar operator called out ranges. 7 miles, 6 miles. The German formation maintained textbook spacing, 3 boats in forward echelon, 3 in reserve. They'd perfected this approach through hundreds of channel engagements. First echelon would draw British response, whilst reserve element positioned for killing blow. 5 miles. Ashworth's crew consisted of 11 souls. Leading seaman Douglas Winters operated the forward twin Vickers, a Londoner who'd survived the Blitz by spending 60 consecutive nights in Bethnal Green tube station, whilst flying shrapnel killed his neighbours above. Able seaman Thomas Reed from Cardiff manned the aft gun, ex-coal miner who'd watched his father die from lung disease caused by 30 years underground. Engine room. Artificer First Class William McPherson from Edinburgh kept the Packard engines running through talent and profanity in equal measure. 4 miles. Ashworth felt the familiar sensation, time simultaneously accelerating and crystallizing. Details became supernaturally sharp. Phosphorescence glowing in the wake, the smell of cordite from earlier action, the feel of binoculars cold against his face. 18 merchantmen behind them, 6 E-boats ahead. 2 MTBs between. The wireless crackled again. "Coastal Force, this is Hammond. I'm positioning north. We split their formation." Solid tactics. Force the Germans to divide attention. Ashworth swung MTB 231 southward, creating a 2-mile gap between British boats. The E-boats would have to choose, concentrate against one MTB and allow the other free torpedo attack, or divide forces and fight both simultaneously. 3 miles. Then leading seaman Winters shouted words that transformed calculation into catastrophe. "Torpedo track, bearing 045, 700 yards. Impossible. The E-boats were still 3 miles distant, well beyond effective torpedo range. But the phosphorescent track racing toward MTB 231 proved reality cared nothing for impossibility. "Hard to starboard, full throttle!" The MTB heeled violently. Packard engines screamed past 1,600 revolutions. The torpedo passed 50 feet to port, so close that crew saw the weapon's wake, felt the pressure wave, smelled the compressed air from its propulsion system. A submarine. The Germans had stationed a U-boat in the channel approaches, positioned perfectly to ambush any British response to the E-boat attack. Sophisticated, coordinated, devastating. The second torpedo struck MTB 231 amidships before Ashworth completed that thought. The explosion lifted the 70-foot boat clear of the water. Fire erupted from the fuel compartment. The blast killed engine room Artificer McPherson instantly, tore the starboard engine from its mounts, ruptured the hull in 3 places. Water poured through rents in the plywood frame. Ashworth found himself on the deck, ears ringing, tasting blood. Flames climbed from the engine compartment, illuminating carnage. The starboard Packard had disintegrated. The port engine sputtered, damaged but somehow still functioning. Water flooded the stern compartment at catastrophic rate. Sub-Lieutenant Crawford appeared through smoke, blood streaming from scalp wound. "We're sinking, sir. 5 minutes, perhaps 8 at most." Leading seaman Winters was shouting into the wireless, calling for assistance that wouldn't arrive in time. The nearest British craft were 15 miles distant. MTB 227 was engaging the E-boat formation alone now, Hammond's 2 torpedoes racing toward targets that simply accelerated and evaded with contemptuous ease. Ashworth pulled himself upright, mind racing through options that narrowed to a single terrible clarity. Protocol demanded he order abandon ship. Doctrine specified exact procedures. Wireless distress call, deploy life rafts, pray for rescue before hypothermia killed them. 3-degree water temperature meant perhaps 15 minutes before incapacitation, 30 before death. But 18 merchantmen still steamed northward. 6 E-boats still close for the kill, now facing only Hammond's single MTB. Once the Germans eliminated the sole remaining defender, they'd slaughter the convoy methodically, sending medical supplies and crew to the channel floor. Ashworth made a decision that would either court-martial him or make him a legend. "Belay abandon ship. Crawford, get that port engine delivering maximum possible power. Winters, redirect every man to damage control. I don't care if we sink, but we're not sinking for 8 minutes. Reed, train the forward gun bearing 270 and prepare for surface engagement at point-blank range." Crawford stared. "Sir?" "If we're sinking anyway," Ashworth said, feeling something like madness or clarity, "we might as well sink into them." The E-boats were 2 miles distant now, closing rapidly. They detected MTB 231's distress, smoke pouring from the stricken vessel visible for miles. German commanders would assume the British boat was finished, focus shifting entirely to Hammond's MTB 227. They were about to discover that a sinking boat, commanded by a desperate man, could become the most dangerous vessel in the Channel. 2156 hours. MTB 231, now listing 12 degrees to starboard, water flooding stern compartments. The Port Packard engine coughed black smoke, but held steady at 1T400 revolutions. Sub-Lieutenant Crawford had performed minor miracles with damaged fuel lines and a prayer, routing flow around ruptured systems through improvised bypasses constructed from cannibalized tubing. Water continued flooding the stern, leading Seaman Winters and 3 ratings manned buckets in futile effort to slow the inevitable, buying minutes rather than hours. Ashworth stood at the helm, knuckles white on the wheel, steering toward the E-boat formation with single-minded determination. The German craft had divided their attention now, 4 boats pursuing Hammond's MTB 227 to the north, whilst 2 peeled southward to finish the wounded British vessel. Perfect. The E-boats approached with casual confidence. German commanders saw a sinking MTB, listing heavily, trailing smoke and fire. They saw easy prey requiring minimal effort. Standard procedure would be single cannon burst to accelerate the inevitable, then rejoin formation for convoy attack. They didn't see Lieutenant Robert Ashworth accelerating to ramming speed. "Range 1,200 yards, Winters called out, manning the forward gun with grim determination. Closing at combined speed of 60 knots. Ashworth felt the deck vibrating beneath his feet. The listing MTB handled like a wounded animal, sluggish, unpredictable, requiring constant correction. Water sloshed through the stern compartment, every wave threatening to swamp them completely. Fire still burned in the engine space despite Crawford's efforts with extinguishers. "Sir," Crawford appeared again, oil-stained and exhausted. "The hull won't take ramming impact. We're already compromised in 17 places. High-speed collision will break us apart." "Then we break apart," Ashworth replied with eerie calm. "But first we take them with us." 1,000 yards. The lead E-boat opened fire with 20mm cannon, tracers arcing across black water. Shells punched through MTB 231's already damaged superstructure, killing 1 rating instantly and wounding 2 others. The German commander assumed he was administering coup de grace to helpless prey. Ashworth didn't return fire, didn't waste ammunition on long-range shots against armored targets. Instead, he steered directly into the incoming rounds, maintaining course with iron determination while shells tore through plywood and flesh alike. 800 yards. The second E-boat joined the bombardment. Combined fire from 2 20mm cannon created deadly crossfire. Able Seaman Reed screamed as shell fragments opened his shoulder but remained at his gun, waiting for the order that Ashworth refused to give. 600 yards. The German commanders finally recognized something was wrong. The sinking British boat wasn't evading, wasn't fleeing, wasn't maneuvering. It was accelerating directly toward them with suicidal intensity. Wireless chatter between E-boats increased, confusion evident even through encrypted German communications. 400 yards. "All guns, open fire!" Ashworth roared. Leading Seaman Winters opened up with the forward Vickers, twin 303 machine guns pouring rounds toward the lead E-boat at point-blank range. The German craft was larger, better armored, but Winters aimed for vision slits and exposed crew positions. Tracers found flesh. German sailors fell screaming as British bullets swept the E-boat's deck. 300 yards. The German commander attempted evasive maneuvers, but momentum and surprise betrayed him. The E-boat swung hard to starboard, exposing its flank directly to MTB 231's ramming course. 200 yards, 100 yards. Ashworth braced himself. Crawford grabbed the rail. Every man on MTB 231 held tight to whatever solid structure remained. 50 yards. The impact came like the hand of God. MTB 231's reinforced bow struck the E-boat amidships at combined speed exceeding 50 knots. The collision generated force equivalent to 20 tons of high explosive. The German vessel's plywood construction, identical to British MTB's, crumpled like paper. The E-boat's fuel tanks ruptured, igniting instantly into fireball visible from Dover. German sailors were flung into freezing water or crushed between collapsing bulkheads. MTB 231 suffered catastrophically, as Crawford predicted. The bow disintegrated on impact. Forward compartments flooded instantly. The collision tore the already damaged starboard side open completely, seawater rushing through hull breaches in unstoppable torrent. But the Port Packard engine still ran. The helm still responded, and one E-boat was already sinking, whilst 5 remained. Ashworth reversed throttle, backing clear of the dying German craft. The second E-boat, positioned 300 yards distant, hesitated in fatal confusion. The German commander had witnessed something beyond his training. A sinking British boat deliberately ramming his companion vessel with berserker fury. That hesitation cost him everything. Ashworth swung MTB 231 through desperate turn, starboard side dragging low in the water. The boat was now more submarine than surface craft, listing 20 degrees, 3/4 flooded, somehow still moving through will and momentum. "Torpedo! One fish! Point-blank range!" Ashworth commanded. The torpedo rating launched their last remaining weapon at 300 yards, range so close that standard doctrine prohibited firing for fear of catching one's own vessel in blast radius. The torpedo raced across open water, phosphorescent wake marking its track, striking the second E-boat beneath the wheelhouse. The explosion broke the German craft's back. The E-boat folded in the middle like closing book, stern rising perpendicular to the surface before sliding beneath black water. German sailors struggled in the water, hypothermia claiming them within minutes. 2 E-boats destroyed in 90 seconds. Ashworth looked northward, where Hammond's MTB 227 was engaging the remaining 4 German craft in desperate running battle. Tracers crisscrossed the darkness. Explosions bloomed orange against black sky. The British boat was outgunned, outmaneuvered, dying by degrees under concentrated fire. MTB 231 was now 90% flooded, barely afloat, moving through water more through stubbornness than buoyancy. The port engine sputtered, fuel supply finally exhausted. Fire had spread to ammunition lockers, small arms rounds cooked off in irregular staccato, adding to the chaos. "Sir," Crawford said quietly, "we've done all we can. She won't stay up another 2 minutes." Ashworth looked at his second-in-command, at leading seaman Winters, still manning his gun despite wounds, at the surviving ratings bailing water in futile defiance. He looked at the burning wreckage of 2 German E-boats. He looked northward at Hammond's MTB fighting alone against impossible odds. "Secure all remaining hands to fixed points," Ashworth ordered. "Full throttle, bearing 320, we're not finished." Crawford stared in disbelief. "Sir, we're sinking. We're literally underwater. The engine is—" "Still running," Ashworth interrupted. "And 4 E-boats remain. Chart me an intercept course." What happened next would perplex German naval intelligence for the remainder of the war. A British MTB that should have sunk 5 minutes earlier somehow accelerated toward 4 E-boats at 15 knots, whilst 3/4 submerged. 2203 hours. 12 minutes since initial torpedo strike. MTB 231 now functionally a submarine with pretensions. The remaining 4 E-boats had concentrated their formation against Hammond's MTB 227, executing textbook encirclement maneuver. The British boat zigzagged desperately, evading torpedo tracks whilst returning fire with diminishing ammunition. German commanders communicated with clipped efficiency, coordinating attacks that would inevitably overwhelm the sole defender within minutes. Then lookouts reported contact bearing 170, the sunken British MTB somehow approaching at speed. The initial reports were dismissed as nervous imagination. The stricken vessel had been destroyed 12 minutes earlier, witnessed sinking by multiple observers. But radar confirmed solid contact. Visual observers saw phosphorescent wake. The impossible was occurring. MTB 231 was attacking again. German commander Wolfgang Steiner aboard E-boat S-102 faced perplexing tactical situation. The British vessel approaching from the south showed no freeboard, essentially running submerged with only superstructure visible above waterline. Fire engulfed the stern. The boat listed so severely that capsizing seemed inevitable with each passing second. Yet it maintained 15 knots and held steady intercept bearing. Steiner radioed his squadron. All units, confirm visual contact bearing 170, British MTB, heavily damaged, approaching our position. The responses came fragmented, confused. Confirmed visual, but vessel appears already sinking. How is it still mobile? Request instructions. Standard engagement protocols do not cover attacking already destroyed targets. Steiner made decision based on pragmatic assessment. The British boat posed minimal threat in its catastrophically damaged state. 2 E-boats would peel off, finish the wounded vessel quickly, then rejoin formation for convoy attack. Efficient, textbook, rational. He dispatched E-boats S-104 and S-109 southward to intercept, whilst S-102 and S-107 continued engaging Hammond's MTB 227. Aboard MTB 231, Ashworth counted on exactly that response. Range to nearest contacts, he called. 800 yards to the 2 breaking south, Winters reported, blood-soaked and grim. Closing fast. The German boats approached confidently, expecting quick victory over dying opponent. Steiner had instructed standard procedure, 20mm cannon fire until British vessels sank completely. What the German commanders didn't comprehend, a boat already sinking cannot be sunk. The fundamental weapon they relied upon, fear of destruction, held no power over men who'd already accepted death. 600 yards. Both E-boats opened fire simultaneously. Shells tore through MTB 231 superstructure, but the British boat's abnormally low profile made targeting difficult. Rounds passed overhead, designed for surface vessels presenting normal freeboard rather than semi-submerged wreck. 400 yards. Ashworth maintained course with mechanical precision, steering by instinct and experience, whilst water flooded the helm station to knee depth. Sub-Lieutenant Crawford braced against the listing deck, calling ranges with academic precision, despite circumstances suggesting complete madness. 300 yards. Forward gun, target the lead boat. Single burst, commander's position, Ashworth ordered. Leading Seaman Winters, wounded and exhausted, opened fire with remaining ammunition. Tracers converged on E-boat S-104's wheelhouse. The German commander ducked instinctively, momentarily blind. 200 yards. That momentary distraction proved fatal. Ashworth swung hard to port, bringing MTB 231's destroyed bow toward S-104's starboard quarter. The German commander recovered vision just in time to see the impossible, a sinking British boat ramming him at 15 knots. The collision lacked the devastating impact of the first ramming. MTB 231's reduced speed and structural integrity meant less destructive force. But the waterlogged British boat weighed substantially more than normal, momentum carrying it through E-boat S-104's lighter construction. The German craft's hull buckled, fuel tanks ruptured. Fire erupted across both vessels, turning the channel surface into blazing inferno. German sailors abandoned ship, whilst MTB 231's crew clung to their impossible boat. 3 E-boats destroyed. But the collision finally broke MTB 231 beyond survival. The bow separated completely, drifting free. The stern settled deeper, port engine finally flooding. Ashworth felt the deck tilting past 40 degrees. E-boat S-109, positioned 400 yards distant, accelerated to finish the British boat. The German commander aimed 20mm cannon at point-blank range, preparing to administer final coup de grace. Then Hammond's MTB 227 struck from the north. The British boat, freed momentarily from 3-to-1 engagement by Ashworth's suicidal diversion, launched both remaining torpedoes at S-109 from optimal range. The German commander detected the launch, attempted evasion, but the weapons tracked perfectly. Twin explosions lifted S-109 clear of the water, breaking the E-boat's keel. The German craft sank in 90 seconds, 4 E-boats destroyed. Commander Steiner aboard S-102, now facing only S-107 against Hammond's MTB, recognized tactical impossibility. The British convoy had gained 10 minutes distance, too far to intercept before additional British reinforcements arrived from Dover. His squadron had suffered catastrophic losses against 2 obsolete MTBs, one of which should have sunk 15 minutes earlier. He ordered retreat. The 2 surviving E-boats accelerated eastward at 40 knots, abandoning the engagement. German sailors in the water screamed for rescue, but Steiner prioritized survival of remaining craft. The Channel consumed those left behind with cold efficiency. Ashworth watched the German boats flee, feeling something between triumph and exhaustion. MTB 231 was now functionally submarines, deck awash, superstructure barely above water. Casualties mounted steadily, 3 dead, 6 wounded from crew of 11. "Sir," Crawford said quietly, "we need to abandon ship. Now, she's going down." Ashworth nodded slowly. Reality finally penetrated adrenaline-fueled calculation. They'd done the impossible, but physics would claim its due. "All hands abandon ship. Deploy life rafts. Hammond's coming to collect us." The crew moved with exhausted efficiency, launching the single remaining raft. They pulled wounded aboard first, then survivors, finally Ashworth himself, captain leaving last, as tradition demanded. MTB 231 slipped beneath black water at 2211 hours, 24 minutes after the torpedo strike that should have killed her immediately. The boat died as she'd lived those final minutes, defiant, impossible, absolutely British. Hammond's MTB 227 collected survivors 30 minutes later. Ashworth and his crew huddled under emergency blankets, hypothermic and bleeding, whilst the convoy steamed safely northward. 18 merchantmen reached port intact. Medical supplies delivered to North African field hospitals where surgeons performed operations that saved hundreds of lives. The cost, 1 MTB, 3 dead sailors, 1 legend born. 16 March 1943. Naval Intelligence Division, Admiralty Building, London. 3 days after the engagement, Commander Richard Blackwood reviewed action reports with mounting disbelief. The 47-year-old intelligence officer had analyzed thousands of naval engagements throughout the war, but the Dover Strait action defied conventional analysis. 6 German E-boats encountered 2 British MTBs defending a convoy. The Germans possessed superior numbers, positioning, and firepower. Doctrine predicted British losses of 75%, with convoy suffering 30 to 40% casualties. Actual outcome: 4 E-boats sunk, 2 retreated, convoy losses 0, British casualties confined to 1 MTB destroyed, and 3 KIA. The German after-action reports, decoded through ultra-intelligence, revealed profound confusion. Commander Steiner's transmission to Kriegsmarine headquarters described enemy employing unknown tactics involving deliberate self-destruction as weapon, and requested immediate doctrine revision to counter British suicide boat tactics. German naval intelligence concluded the British had developed new weapon system, specialized ramming boats designed for close-quarters destruction. They issued fleet-wide warnings about explosive motorboats and initiated defensive doctrine modifications. The reality was simpler and more profound. One lieutenant with nothing left to lose had improvised tactics that conventional military doctrine insisted were impossible. Blackwood summoned Lieutenant Ashworth to the Admiralty 5 days after the action. The young officer arrived still bearing visible injuries, facial lacerations, burnt hands, hypothermia-induced tremors. He stood at attention while senior staff reviewed his conduct. "Lieutenant Ashworth," Blackwood began formally, "you engaged 6 enemy vessels with 2 boats, sustained catastrophic damage, deliberately rammed multiple enemy craft whilst your own vessel was sinking, and continued attacking despite complete loss of combat capability." He paused. "You violated 17 separate regulations regarding ship preservation, crew safety, and engagement protocols." Ashworth maintained rigid attention. Yes, sir. You also destroyed 4 enemy boats, preserved an entire convoy, delivered critical medical supplies, and so thoroughly confused German naval doctrine that ultra-intercepts show them reorganizing their entire channel strategy. Blackwood allowed slight smile. You're either the bravest officer in the Royal Navy or completely insane. Permission to speak, sir? Granted. I was just trying not to drown before taking some of the bastards with me, sir. The room erupted in laughter, senior officers recognizing the quintessentially British understatement. The Admiralty faced delicate situation. Ashworth's tactics were brilliant, but impossible to codify. You cannot standardize continue attacking whilst sinking as doctrine. You cannot order officers to deliberately destroy their vessels. The effectiveness derived precisely from desperation and impossibility. Yet the strategic implications were undeniable. German E-boat operations in the Channel declined significantly following the engagement. Kriegsmarine commanders grew cautious, suspicious of British tactics they couldn't comprehend. Convoy losses decreased by 37% over subsequent 3 months. The psychological impact proved as valuable as tactical victory. German sailors, previously confident in technological and tactical superiority, now faced enemy demonstrating fanatical determination to inflict damage regardless of cost. The fear worked both directions across the Channel. Ashworth received the Distinguished Service Order, citation reading, "For exceptional courage and tactical brilliance in surface action against superior enemy forces, demonstrating the highest traditions of the Royal Navy." The citation diplomatically omitted specific tactical details that violated regulations. Sub-Lieutenant Crawford received Distinguished Service Cross. Leading Seaman Winters received Distinguished Service Medal. Engine Room Artificer McPherson received posthumous mention in dispatches, recognition that his maintenance kept engines running until the moment of his death. The survivors of MTB 231's crew received new assignments, scattered across coastal forces to share their experience. They never spoke publicly about the 20 minutes that defied physics and doctrine, but their presence influenced younger crews through example rather than instruction. The wider impact manifested gradually. Coastal Forces personnel displayed increased aggressive confidence, attacking German formations with determination that statistics suggested was irrational. German records documented growing reluctance among E-boat commanders to press home attacks against British coastal convoys. By June 1943, convoy losses in the Channel decreased by 49% compared to March. The change couldn't be attributed solely to one engagement, but the psychological shift was measurable and significant. Ashworth returned to operational duties 3 weeks after the action, commanding a new MTB. He participated in 47 subsequent engagements, surviving the war with 14 confirmed enemy vessels destroyed. He never again deliberately rammed a target while sinking, but his reputation ensured German boats gave him wide berth when identified. The broader legacy emerged in unexpected ways. Post-war analysis revealed the Dover Strait action influenced development of aggressive small boat tactics that became standard in multiple navies. The concept that apparent defeat could become weapon through unconventional application changed doctrinal thinking. In 1957, Lieutenant Commander Ashworth, DSO, now instructing at the Royal Naval College, received visit from former German naval officer Wolfgang Steiner, commander of E-boat S-102 during the March 1943 engagement, sought explanation he'd wondered about for 14 years. "How?" Steiner asked simply. "Did you keep fighting while sinking?" Ashworth considered the question carefully. "We were already dead," he replied. "Once you accept that, everything else becomes rather simple." Steiner nodded slowly, understanding finally the mindset he'd faced across black water that night. "It was very British," he said with something like respect. The action remained relatively obscure in popular histories, overshadowed by larger battles and more dramatic campaigns. The 18 merchantmen that reached port safely never made headlines. The medical supplies they carried saved lives in field hospitals whose patients never knew who delivered their salvation. But in coastal forces mess halls, the story passed from veteran to recruit through quiet conversation. The lesson wasn't tactical. You cannot teach ram enemy whilst drowning. The lesson was deeper, that ordinary men facing impossible situations sometimes discover extraordinary solutions through simple refusal to accept defeat. MTB 231's nameplate was recovered during post-war salvage operations, mounted in the Royal Navy Museum at Portsmouth. The plaque reads simply, MTB 231, lost in action 12th March 1943. Crew, 3 KIA, 8 survivors. Enemy vessels destroyed, 4. The numbers don't capture the 20 minutes that changed Channel warfare. They don't convey the determination of exhausted sailors refusing to quit. They don't explain how a sinking boat became weapon system. But they record what matters most: duty fulfilled, enemy defeated, convoy saved. In the end, Lieutenant Ashworth's mad Gambit proved something fundamental about British character in wartime. That when faced with impossible odds, when conventional wisdom says surrender, when every rational calculation predicts defeat, there remains one final option: attack anyway, and sometimes, impossibly, that's enough. If this story of courage and determination resonated with you, please subscribe to our channel and ring the bell to ensure you never miss another forgotten tale of British heroism. Share your thoughts in the comments below. Were there members of your own family who served in coastal forces? What other untold stories from the war deserve recognition? Your engagement helps preserve these vital histories. Thank you for watching, and remember, they were ordinary people who did extraordinary things when it mattered most.